It's time for Agriculture, presented by Turkana Farms in Germantown, New York, a small-scale producer of heritage breed livestock and a wide array of vegetables and berries on just over 39 acres. They also produce a full array of garden vegetables, many of them heirloom varieties raised naturally, as well as an assortment of berries, including raspberries, blackberries, gooseberries, black, red, and white currants, mulberries, and elderberries. And now, here's Mark Scherzer.
You farm like a gay boy from the city. Those words once would have appeared in a nightmare in which I was exposed as an imitation farmer, a Marie Antoinette in shepherd costume. But shockingly, it was me uttering them this week, to my visiting friend Steve. To his credit, Steve reacted not with shame, but rather playfully screeched out a full-throated "Ha!" as if to say, how else would I farm? My comment was provoked when Steve, practicing at doing chores under my supervision, so he might cover for me if I go away for a few days, trundled a wheelbarrow full of hay and poop from the barn floor out to the garden. Upon arrival, he very carefully inserted his pitchfork into the top of the pile of muck and gently sprinkled a small quantity onto the leek trench. It was the precision, the delicacy, the gentleness of that act that made me blurt out my gay boy comment. A real farmer, I thought, would drive the pitchfork forcefully into the deep pile and chuck a huge forkful of muck on the trench without regard for neatness. Not that such delicacy is unique to Steve. Whenever my friend Eric is here and feeds the sheep in the afternoon, he meticulously goes around emptying each feed bowl before placing the grain treat in it. To be sure, it's necessary to remove any bupkis, that's Yiddish for these little black pellets of sheep poop, or more colloquially, things that don't amount to much, or the sheep won't touch the food. But Eric doesn't stop there. He also empties any little trace of hay sitting in the bowls as well. When I first asked why he was taking such care when the sheep would happily eat the hay remnants, Eric harked back to his family's very fine restaurant in Quebec's Old City, staffed by chefs imported from France. Would you serve guests the main course on a plate full of crumbs from the appetizer? When I reminded him that they are just sheep, he in turn reminded me that they are beings too. There's something duly gay to my mind about a concern for universally elegant dining and a concern for the welfare of those who are often left out. When Peter and I first bought this farm, I was extremely sensitive about not belonging in this milieu. Our very first weekend, a hostile neighbor across the street set up a chair in front of his barn and talked to friends loud enough for us to hear, hooting, "Farmers! Can you imagine?" to loud guffaws. He intended insult, but he had a point. I could barely myself imagine farming, coming as I do from two heritages, Jewish and gay, with overwhelmingly urban orientations. Jews in Europe were for generations forbidden to own land and developed no farming culture. Gays, even if they had farming origins, often migrated to cities to escape rural fear of difference and to find the freedom that came with numbers and anonymity. An urban life carries many potential consequences. Ignorance about how food is produced, a certain squeamishness about natural processes that are not confronted on a daily basis, and an elevation of aesthetic concerns. Until I met Peter in my late 20s and started gardening, I could not distinguish between a beet green and a bean plant. I never had touched a farm animal until we bought the farm, and at first I feared doing so. But like some Jews who established chicken farms in New Jersey and kibbutzim in Israel, and like gay men who associated farming with hypermasculinity, those farmhand fantasies, I romanticized agriculture. So in pursuit of my fantasy, I forced myself to overcome my fears and sensibilities and do what I thought real farmers do. The dirtier and more dangerous the activity, the closer I thought I was coming. I rejoiced in and often wrote about things like unloading hay from a pickup truck bed into a manger while a hostile bull rocked my truck, catching piglets to castrate them while fending off their angry mother with a hoe, and wrestling sheep in order to shear them or trim their hooves. I've gone from fear of rats to trying to stomp on them if I see them in the chicken coop. Yet somewhere along the way, I also shed the feeling that hypermasculinity was a state to aspire to. This week, of course, I can't help thinking about the thuggish mob boss call by President Trump to Georgia election officials trying to reverse his loss, and the violent brown shirt assault on the Capitol instigated by him in the same cause. These are the current reprises of his Ukraine call and Charlottesville, even if hypocritically depicted by those Republicans who are ready to abandon him as something brand new. They stand as reminders of the potential dangers of glorifying hypermasculinity. But I think farming taught me long before this that sensitivity and empathy are as useful as strength and dominance in operating a farm. As a farmer, you've got to closely observe your plants, your animals, and your land, and recognize that the best remedy to a problem is not necessarily the most aggressive one. If your tomato leaves are the wrong shade of green, should you just remove the blighted greenish yellow ones or pull the whole plant? I would go for just the leaves. Should you control that wild ram by facing him down with your greater aggression? Or should you calm him down by removing the thorn from his foot? I bonded most with our boar Vernon by sitting in his pen for a weekend picking maggots out of festering wounds he suffered in a fight. I no longer cry when driving lambs to the slaughterhouse, but I have come to realize that farming is very much about taking care of things. So how much have I really changed? I've got more muscle on me than I had before, and my farm exploits give me a certain social cachet. Steve says pictures of him with the sheep make great icebreakers with the men he chats with online. But I suspect most objective observers would find me still to be farming much as they expect a gay boy from the city would farm. I'm still hopeless with machinery and squeamish about giving injections or slaughtering animals. I won't even consider culling my blind ewe, Aisha, despite her lack of economic value and the extra work she requires. And if I have a melon rind for the pigs, I make an effort to divide it equitably between them. Perhaps I don't serve it as elegantly as Eric would, but at least I make an effort. What has probably changed more than how I farm is how I feel about myself as a farmer. I now see what I do in my own way as a real endeavor, as nothing to be ashamed of. When I tell Eric or Steve that they're farming like gay boys in the city, I'm not criticizing. I'm expressing my affection and gratitude for the spirit and touch of style they bring to this quirky little endeavor.
Agriculture is underwritten by Takana Farms, LLC, a small-scale producer of heritage-bred livestock and a wide array of vegetables and berries on just over 39 acres in Germantown, New York. More information, 518-537-3815.